Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday of Holy Week, and we are moving ever closer to Good Friday, the time when Jesus went to the cross. And the events of Thursday, some call it Maundy Thursday. The events of Thursday really set up those events on Friday. They are of vital importance to our understanding of the cross, and we see Jesus preparing for the Passover feast with his disciples. We see him instituting the Lord's Supper, really redefining this Passover meal that commemorated the Old Testament, where the Israelites were led out of captivity in Egypt, and Jesus really reinstituting that as the new meal of the new covenant, where he led his people out of slavery to sin. And we see in the book of John, Jesus showing the way of love, the way of a servant who puts others before himself, who takes the low road, and he washes his disciples' feet. And then we see Jesus go out to the garden and pray, and we see him there betrayed and then taken under the cover of darkness to a sham trial before the religious leaders of the day. This is an incredibly important day to remember. And as I was reading in Matthew, at our church, we are looking at the Passion Week of Jesus, Holy Week, and we're looking at it through the lens of how did Jesus show love to others. We were just studying in 1 Corinthians 13 this past Sunday, and we saw that love is supernatural. Really, Jesus is the one who exemplifies the love that Paul describes in 1 Corinthians 13. And as I was reading today in Matthew 26, the word that jumped out to me was in verse 38. Then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." Remain. That word remain is the same word that is translated in 1 Corinthians 13 as endure. Love endures all things. It's the same word that is translated in John 15 as abide. That love abides. And what we see as Matthew is a master of contrasts in the characters, and that's one thing that you can look for when you're reading biblical narrative, is the contrast between the characters, and how Jesus really always shows the better way. We see Jesus remaining. We see him enduring all things on Thursday, while everyone else around him fell away. He institutes the Lord's Supper, and even as he's instituting the Lord's Supper, he is declaring that one of them is going to betray him. And they all wonder, is it going to be me? Am I going to remain with Jesus or not? And it comes down to one man who has already made a plot with the religious leaders to betray Jesus, and he asks, "Is it I, Rabbi?" He already knows that it's him, and Jesus says, "You have said so." And then he talks about the Lord's Supper, and they sing a hymn, and they go out to the Mount of Olives, and Jesus tells them that they're all going to fall away. None of them are going to remain. It is written, "I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." And of course, Peter is the first to say, "No, I'm never going to fall away. I'm always going to remain." And Jesus says, "No, you're going to deny me 3 times. And then he takes them to pray, and he takes them to Gethsemane. He says to them, sit here while I go over there. And then he takes Peter, James, and John a little bit further, and he says, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me. And he wants them to continue on in prayer, but they fall asleep. He doesn't want to go to the cross in his desires, in his humanity. He knows the pain that is ahead of him, but he yields himself to the will of the Father. He even appropriates that as his own will. My Father, this cannot pass unless I drink it. Your will be done. And he comes again and he finds them sleeping. They will not remain. They will not remain. They're not showing that type of enduring love. But Jesus is. And so his betrayer comes and betrays him with a kiss. Jesus calls him friend. What love that Jesus has. What love that Jesus demonstrates. And what phony love Judas demonstrates. And then the council where Jesus is put on a false trial, and then the denial by Peter. And Jesus stands alone, enduring in love to the cross. And it's interesting, the same word, remain, or endure, or abide, is also used in Hebrews chapter 12. At least the root of it is that Jesus endured the cross for the joy set before him. That he remained under the pressure of the cross because he knew that he was accomplishing God's will, because he knew that there was joy on the other side as God would raise him from the dead. Jesus endured where no one else would or could. And I think that's so important to remember as we go to the celebration of Holy Week, that Jesus endured the cross on our behalf, so that we would not have to. He had to go to that place alone. And so what does that mean for us? How do we endure in love? How do we not end up like the disciples? Well, he tells them, he says, you're going to be scattered, but after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. After I am raised up. The resurrection makes a huge difference in their lives. And we see where Peter denied, where all of them denied and were scattered away after the resurrection, after they see his finished work accomplished, and it takes root in their hearts and in their lives, they do remain. They remain with him, faithful to him, even unto death. And so how do we remain? We put our trust in the finished work of Jesus Christ. How do we remain? We remain watchful with him, praying with him, going to him for the endurance that we need because he has endured it all. Love endures all things. How will you demonstrate enduring love in the power of your Savior who endured for you, toward God, toward others, today? You are loved.